Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is chapter 6, and we're talking about creation day 4. We're going to be discussing the planets. Specifically, this one today is called the Way of the Sun. On the 4th day, he connected together the 2 luminaries, of which one was not greater in size than the other. They were equal as regard their height, qualities, and illuminating powers, as it is said, and God made the 2 great lights, or the 2 great luminaries. Genesis 1:16. Rivalry ensued between them. One said to the other, I am bigger than you. The other rejoined, I am bigger than you. What did the Holy One, blessed be he, do? So that there should be peace between them, because like we said, peace is the most important thing for God. Peace and harmony in his creation. All of creation has peace except for mankind, and particularly when there's no peace among Israel, that's when the world falls apart. Clearly there's no peace among Israel. So what did he do? He made the one larger and the other smaller, as it is said, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars he also made. So before we get into the stars, let's just focus on the luminaries right now. We have to discuss them both, but again, this is primarily on the sun. These are obviously the sun and the moon, the 2 great luminaries. Now, just by reading the complete verse in Genesis 1, we can see when this whole thing took place. And God said, let there be luminaries in the expanse of the heavens to separate between the day and between the night, and they shall be for signs and for appointed seasons and for the days of the year. Great. Okay, now here, this is the thought that manifests. And they shall be for luminaries in the expanse of the heavens to shed light upon the earth. And it was so. Here's the function. But behold, the molding still is taking place, like we said. Raw materials, putting them together, and then the final result. So, verse 16, and God made the 2 great luminaries. He thought about it, this is their function, and now he's making them. And God made the 2 great luminaries, and now right here, this is where it all went down, right after that. He made the 2 great luminaries, the great luminary to rule the day, and the lesser luminary to rule the night, and the stars. But they were both great, meaning equal in every way. And then one is bigger than the other, meaning now the sun is greater. He made the sun bigger, the moon smaller. When God created them, both the sun and the moon were equal in every way, size, brightness, and power. And if we read all the commentators, starting with Rashi, we will see that it was the moon that got all high and mighty. Although the sun was created first, the moon argued that the way the days are counted, and it was evening and it was morning, meaning that night always precedes the day, that she should be greater. Also saying that how can you have 2 crowns on one head? Now, we already know enough to understand that pride is not something that God looks upon fondly. So what did God do? He made the moon smaller and the sun bigger than its original size. He took away the light of the moon completely and made its shine entirely dependent upon that of the sun. Where does the moon get its light from? From the sun. It's a reflection. And yet before this all took place, God already knew and already saw, which is why we, Israel, count primarily according to the lunar cycle, and bless the new moon every month, and count these specific months of the year. In fact, this was the very first command given to Israel as a nation while Israel were still in Egypt, specifically right before the Exodus. It had to take place in there. So in Exodus, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, specifically it says, Be'eretz Mitzrayim. He spoke to them plenty of times in Egypt, didn't say in Egypt. Now this mitzvah was given in Egypt. In Egypt saying, this month shall be to you the head of the months, the first month, which is Nisan. To you, you and only you, Israel, shall it be the first of the months of the year. So this is Nisan. This is our new year. Before the size changes took place, God said to separate between the day and between the night. So let's ask some questions. How could there be a separation if they were identical? This one's bright, that one's bright. If they were identical, there would be no day or night, right? How do I know when it's according to the clock? Sundials. Where did the time of day come from? You see, it's all about the sun and the moon. In other words, God already knew what would take place before he even created them. Second question, how would we even know that night is supposed to be dark and day is supposed to be light? God said so. Again, before he created them, he knew what they were going to do. He knew what was going to happen. You see, the moon didn't just spring this objection on God. Yes, we understand. All this, like all things, is for our benefit, which is why we read in Isaiah 30, verse 26, what will happen at the end of days. And the light of the moon shall be like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of the 7 days. Meaning, the moon's going to be as bright as the sun's going to be. There's no more night. If that's how the moon is going to be, it's going to have its own light, like the light of the sun. And the light of the sun is going to be like sevenfold for 7 days. On the day the Lord shall bind the fracture of his people, and the stroke of their wound he shall heal. This, of course, right, we see sun healing. This is part of the prophecy that we can read in Micah chapter 3. For lo, the sun comes, glowing like a furnace, and all the audacious sinners and all the perpetrators of wickedness will all be stubble. And the sun that comes shall burn them up, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch, says the Lord of hosts. And the Son of Mercy shall rise with healing in its wings for you who fear my name. Then will you go forth and be fat as fatted calves. Now, I'm going to go on with this, but before that, I want to stop for a second because I didn't, it takes me a week to write these things until I record. A thought came up this week, and I was expressing this to Anarina. The sun is going to come, the same sun as we know, we've discussed this many times, the sun is going to burn the wicked, right? It says the sinners, the audacious sinners, and all the perpetrators of wickedness will be stubble. The Zedim are the evil spirits, if you will. The Kol Osei Risha are the wicked ones that know what's up. Not those. It doesn't say Risha, lo achotim, not the sinners, meaning lachto is to miss. Those who don't live right because they didn't know or whatever. These are people that actually know and they choose to ignore what God said, who will be burnt up by this sun. And yet that same sun will be the Son of Mercy. So we see here the same sun as being a function as judgment and then also mercy. It depends on where you are. So now if it says, and the Son of Mercy shall rise with healing in its wings for you who fear my name, for anyone who fears God's name, if you indeed fear God's name, you will keep his command, right? Okay. Kol yirei shmi, yirei, who revere my name. Reshit chokhmah irat Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the reverence of God, meaning borders, boundaries. This is for the 6 days of creation. That's what it is. It's borders and boundaries and how to navigate through them. So what was I thinking this week? With healing in its wings, meaning for anyone who fears God's name, which means God is saying that if you fear my name living in this world, you need healing. By default, you are sick. You see? He wouldn't say this otherwise. And now if you look at the world today, what seems to be normal is that's the real sickness. And yet, those that actually fear and revere God's name and try and live according to his will as best we can, not according to our own understanding, but according to how God gave it and the sages, we need healing because this world is affecting us. This world is actually making us sick. It's difficult. How long can you... The walls are closing. You understand? There's no more ground anymore. This world has, over the last 100 years, become smaller and smaller and smaller. There's no more privacy. There's nothing. Everyone knows everything and everyone can find anything about anyone. We do need healing from this world, but all those who are causing this, they will be stubble. So it's very interesting. Again, when God says one thing, that means that there's a reason for that. If the sun needs to heal you, that means you need healing, assuming you're on the right spot. Anyway, let's continue. Just something to think about. So just like we discussed in last class, how water can be both judgment and mercy, so too the power of the sun, like we just saw. However, the same sun will burn the wicked, turning them into ash, and simultaneously heal those who fear God's name. So let's continue. The stars. All the stars minister to the 7 planets. In the Hebrew, it adds the words sha'ot, hours, meaning the hours of the day, 12 and 12. That's how the day is separated. The great luminaries, which now only one remains for a time, are ministered to by the stars. And which stars are we talking about here? That which are in our solar system. And their names are, I'm going to give them the Hebrew and their English translation. First one, Kochav, that's Mercury. Levana, moon. You're going to say moon is not a star, it's a moon. I'm giving you this for a very specific reason, okay? Moon, Levana. Levana also, so Yareach is modern day Hebrew for moon, but Birkat Levana, the blessing of the moon, or blessing of the new moon, Levana is how you say moon from the biblically speaking. Levana is also a Hebrew name. It also means Levana means white. Anyway, Levana, moon, Shabtai, Saturn, Tzedek. Tzedek also means righteousness or justice. Tzedek is Jupiter. Ma'adim, Mars. This is also the planet of Edom, Ma'adim, because it's red. Ma'adim, Edom, Mars. Chama, Sun. Noga, Venus. Those are the 7. The abbreviation to the 7 are the first letters which come out to Kalash Tzamchan, right? Kalash Tzamchan, Kochav Levana Shabtai, Kalash Tzamchan, Tzedek Ma'adim Chama Noga. Okay, it's just like the 10 plagues are Datzach, Adash, Ba'achav, Dam Tzvadeh, Kini Marov, and so on and so forth. The order that Safaria writes in English, though, is not the order written in the Hebrew. Nothing new. Also, I hope you can understand at this point that the meaning and purpose from what we have available to us is not something that we will be taking a deep dive into because we don't have enough time, okay, as far as this goes. We just want to try and focus on the main theme of the chapter. But if you're interested, much of these cycles are written in the Book of Formation, Sefer Yetzirah. Good luck with that. These stars minister to the 7 days of the week, starting with what we call Sunday, and counting as we do from there, from the night before, meaning from Saturday night to Sunday night, and so on. So, Vayihi Erev Vayi Boker, the Erev is Motzei Shabbat, but before, technically, okay, Shabbos was always there, we know this, but it starts from the night before, which is technically Saturday night, all the way until Sunday night. That's day 1. Vayi Erev, Vayi Boker. Right? Sundown, nighttime, daytime. Okay. Each day has 2 stars, beginning with the one and ending with the other. On the first day, it's Mercury and then the sun. The second day, Jupiter, moon. The third day, Venus and Mars. The fourth day, Saturn, Mercury. The fifth day, Sun and Jupiter. The sixth day, Moon and Venus. And the seventh day, Mars and Saturn. And these 7 minister to the 12 mazalot, the zodiac signs. Now, again, I'm going to have to stop a bunch of times. I've already written plenty of disclaimers throughout this, but these things, just take it for what it is. You're welcome to do, you're always welcome to do and encouraged to do your own digging if you feel like going into this. This particularly is part of a 3-class study. We're talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars. So there's a lot of information here right now. You don't have to be a scholar when it comes to these things. You just have to know that they exist, see how it's positioned for you to get a better idea of the governance and of the order, and move on, okay? Don't deviate too much into this. So, like we said, these 7 stars minister to the 12 mazalot, the zodiac signs. Now, mazalot comes from the singular tense mazal. Modern day Hebrew means luck. Mazal tov, good luck, right? But this mazal is not what you understand as lucky or unlucky. It originally comes from the word linzol, which means to drip. They are above us, right? And they come and they drip down, so to speak. This is why the year, the month, the week, the day, the hour, the minute that you were born actually does have a meaning. These are bodies over there, and everything has a meaning. There's no such thing as a coincidence in creation, okay? However, if you are Israel, you have a choice. There is no such thing as luck in this world. But we're not talking about throwing the dice here necessarily. We're talking about planetary alignments and constellations. So just like there is no such thing as luck in this world, it's not the kind of luck that you're thinking. But there is such a thing as mazal in this world, according to how God created the constellations. Okay? Now, before we go on here, I'm going to explain some things. I wrote it down here. There are, of course, auspicious times, as we know, but we must make a separation between Israel and between the nations. Even Israel has plenty of auspicious times, right? Last series, auspicious times. When did I actually start it as to when did I complete it, and so on and so forth. Very, very specifically. When do you go battling Amalek? Adar is the best time to go do it, right? There's different times, let's say, if you want to go have surgery, if you want to have a court date, all these things are biblical. They all come from there, and they have been extrapolated, and the sages explain upon that. So there are auspicious times based on everything. What we are seeing here is the creation of these cycles, after which we will get into the times of Israel. I'd like to introduce something to you all out there, and this is coming from a Talmudic source, which, as we know, extrapolates from a biblical source. That's how the Talmud works. The Talmud takes the verses from the Mishnah, and the Talmud explains the verses from the Mishnah, which were taken from the Torah, by the Torah itself. If anyone read Talmud, they would know that this is what it is. It's not, they call it witchcraft or anything like that, but it's not. It's like, well, the Torah says this. What does this mean? Verse, 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 question, question, question. Whoa, illumination, understanding. Thank you. Let's move on. This is how we best serve God. So it says in Masechet Shabbat 156a, it was stated that Rabbi Hanina says, a constellation makes one wise, and a constellation makes one wealthy. And there is a constellation for the Jewish people that influences them. Rabbi Yochanan said, there is no constellation for the Jewish people that influences them. The Jewish people are not subject to the influence of astrology. Rabbi Yochanan follows in his own reasoning. As Rabbi Yochanan said, from where is it derived that there is no constellation for the Jewish people? When we say constellation, we mean mazal. As it stated, thus said the Lord, learn not the way of the nations, and be not dismayed at the signs of the heaven, for the nations are dismayed at them. Jeremiah 10:2. What they see has nothing to do with you, O Israel. The nations will be dismayed by them, but not the Jewish people, not Israel. And Rav also holds that there is no constellation for the Jewish people, as Rav Yehuda said, that Rav said. From where is it derived that there is no constellation for the Jewish people? She'ein mazal le'Israel. The way you would say today is like, what do you mean, Israel's got no luck? No, listen, as it is stated with regard to Abraham, and he brought him outside, Genesis 15:5, and he brought him outside and said, look now, it says, towards the heaven, we'll go with the Hebrew, but first we'll read in English, and count the stars, if you are able to count them, and he said unto them, so shall your offspring be. The full verse is, ויוצא אותו החוצה ויאמר הבט נא השמיימה וספור הכוכבים אם תוכל לספור אותם ויאמר לו כה יהיה זרעך. He took him outside and said, please look heavenward and count the stars if you are able to count them. And he said, so shall your seed be. Now, I'm positive, I know this. I gave a teaching on this because the language in Hebrew, and I believe it was according to Rabbeinu Bachya, if I'm not mistaken, that said that the way it says Habetna Hashamayma did not mean that he was looking up, but rather it meant that he was looking downward. God took him out of the world. He took him above, took him out of the cosmos. He showed him the constellations, and beneath it was the world. It says, this is where you're at. Meaning God took Abraham above it all. It says, look down upon them. Let's continue. The sages derive from this that Abraham said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe, behold, you have given, in Genesis 15:3, you have given me no offspring, and one born in my house is to be my heir. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, no. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this man shall not be your heir, rather, one that will come forth from your own innards shall be your heir. Now, at this point, Abraham was 70 years old. So Ishmael was not born yet. He was talking about Eliezer, because Eliezer was his faithful servant at that point, right? And that was in Genesis 15:4. Abraham said before him, Master of the universe, I looked at my astrological map. I see that. And according to the configuration of my constellations, I saw when I was born, I saw the time, the day, the hour, and I see, and according to the way that you set up the universe, I am not fit to have a son. Look at this. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, emerge from your astrology. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? As the verse states, and he brought him outside, as there is no constellation for Israel, en mazal Israel. What is your thinking? Is it because Jupiter is situated in the west that you can not have children? I will restore it and establish it in the east. Abraham, what? Is this planet in your way? No problem. Boom. Jupiter, from west to east. There you go. Here's your boy. Call him Isaac. Because we're all going to be laughing at this one day. Yitzchak. You get it? It's a Hebrew joke. Anyway, what? God's not going to move the planets? God's not going to change reality for his children? He just did it right now for Abraham. And that is the meaning of that which is written in regard to Abraham, who has raised up one from the east. He will call justice, tzedek, to his steps, leraglo, to his feet. Jupiter, tzedek. Okay. Amazing. He gives nations before him and makes him rule over kings. His sword makes them as the dust, his bow as the driven stubble. Isaiah 41:2. God established Jupiter, tzedek, in the east on behalf of Abraham. And from that which transpired to Shmuel, it's Rav Shmuel, one can also conclude that there is no constellation for the Jewish people, no luck for En Mazal Israel. The Gemara relates that Shmuel and the Gentile sage Ablet were sitting, and they saw these people were going into the lake. Ablet said to Shmuel, this person, one of the guys going to the lake, this person will go, and he will not return because a snake will bite him and he will die. He's looking at the stars, right? Shmuel said to him, if he is a Jew, he will go and come back. As they were sitting for a while, the person they discussed went away, and then he returned. Ablet stood up, threw down the person's burden, and inside he found a snake cut and cast in 2 pieces, meaning what he was carrying, right? Shmuel said to him, what did you do to merit to be saved from death? The person said to him, every day we all take bread together and eat from the bread. Today there was one of us who did not have bread, and when it came time to gather the bread, he was embarrassed because he did not have any to give. I said to the others, I will go and take the bread. When I came to the person who did not have the bread, I rendered myself as one who was taking from him so that he would not be embarrassed. Shmuel said to him, you performed a mitzvah, went to spare the shame or the embarrassment from your fellow Jew is something that will shatter the heavens. It will quite literally save you from death. Shmuel said to him, you performed a mitzvah. Shmuel went out and taught based on this incident that even though It is written, and charity will save you from death, Proverbs 10:2, Utzdaka tatzil mimavet. It does not only mean that it will save a person from an unusual death, but even from death itself. And from that which transpired to Rabbi Akiva is another great story. As well, it can be derived that there is no constellation for the Jewish people, Ein Mazal Yisrael, meaning Israel are not governed by the stars. If we have something to do, the stars will be moved by God for us. Rabbi Akiva had a daughter. And Chaldean astrologers told him that on the same day that she enters the wedding canopy, on the same day that she's going to get married, a snake will bite her and she will die. She was very worried about this. On that day, on her wedding day, she took the ornamental pin from her hair. She had, this thing with like a needle sticking out, pin from her hair. I guess it was a big needle. She stuck it into a hole in the wall for safekeeping, right? And it happened that it entered directly into the eye of the snake. The snake was waiting there for her. Right in there, eye of the snake. In the morning, when she took the pin, the snake was pulled and it came out with it. Her father, Rabbi Akiva, said to her, "What did you do? You see, something needs to be done, right? What did you do to merit being saved from the snake?" The snake and the snake, you get it? She told him, "In the evening, a poor person came and knocked on the door, and everyone was preoccupied with the feast, and nobody heard him." This is her wedding night. Yeah, during the celebrations, right? "I stood and took the portion that you had given me, and I gave it to him." Rabbi Akiva said to her, "You performed a mitzvah, and you were saved in its merit." Look at when we do things for others, and it might cost us. It'll cost us name, it'll cost us reputation, it'll cost us money, whatever it is, it will cost us. But we do something for others. Who God brings them to us. They send them to us because we need these mitzvot. You understand? Don't be so quick to shoo someone away. Rabbi Akiva went out and taught based on this incident that even though it is written, Utzdaka tatzil mimavet, and charity will save you from death in Proverbs 10:2, it does not mean that it will save a person only from an unusual death, but even from death itself. So, people, what do we learn from this? It's not just enough to read Torah, but to read it in order to live it. When you are there, the stars will be realigned for your sake. They were, after all, created for the sake of Israel, as were all things. Now that we have this knowledge, let's get back to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. He continues, "All of them minister to the 12 constellations which correspond to the 12 months. The constellations are, and they're different in modern day astrology. In other words, what one sign will be, the dates are different because we go according to our calendar." Okay, first one is Aries, that is Taleh, the ram. 2, Taurus, Shol, the ox. Gemini, Te'umim, the twins. Cancer, Sartan, the crab, I pinch. 5, Leo, Aries, the lion. 6, Virgo, Betula, the maiden. 7, Libra, Moznaim, the scales. 8, Scorpio, Akrav, the scorpion. 9, Sagittarius, the Keshet or Kashat, it's the bow. 10, Capricornus, Capricorn. Gedi, the goat. 11, Aquarius, Deli, it's the pail or a bucket. And 12, Pisces, Dagim, fish. A few of these you'll see they have like the twins are 2, the scales are 2, and the fish are 2. Okay, so these were created in the time of Bereshit to govern the world and establish its laws. This line that I just read is not written in Sepharia, but it's written in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, in other words, all these things help establish God's laws, the laws of nature, the laws of creation. This is how it works, which means if we go by God's law, technically we are above the law. I know it might sound terrible and conceited, but okay, you know what? Take it however you want to take it. I hope I'm not teaching kindergarten people anymore, okay? You guys understand. Regarding this, the Maharzu clarifies that this includes all the stars, including the 7 that we counted before who are ministered to the mazalot. Count before are ministered. Okay. And when ancient knowledge was given, it was known that every 3 signs of the 12 mazalot were in charge of one of the 4 foundations. So you have 3, 3, and 3, right? 3, 3, 3, and 3, 4 foundations. These are also the seasons. Each one of the signs governs a nation. Now, although the nations do not follow the Hebrew calendar, that is neither here nor there. So just like the stargazers, the astrologists or astrologers, and diviners can actually see the future from the stars, starting from way back when. They can do this, right? This thing exists. I've had people, growing up, I had this great rabbi, and I was asking him about this. He says, one time this astrologer, a world-famous astrologer, came to one of my classes, and they said, let me do your chart. He goes, for what? He goes, no, you'll see the power of this. And he said, you know what? Okay, go ahead. And so he gave them his all the details, his birthday and hour and whatever. 2 weeks later, this person comes back, says, I have these 2 dates, and these 2 dates are the worst days of your life. What happened in those dates? He goes, well, here I got married, and here my first daughter was born. So you can just take your astrology and skedaddle. Has nothing to do with us. If you give it power, it absolutely will. But you have to understand, Ein Mazal Israel. We are above this. So in later years, you get famous astrologers like Nostradamus from the 14th century, who, guess what? He was actually a Jew. And they are limited to the knowledge of what will be. And this dude, though, he was right on. World events that took place, he predicted. Seriously, you don't even want to know what he predicted that's coming next. Why not? What he also predicted is also said in the Zohar. So including, the asteroids that are to come, but we can already read, like I said, in the Zohar and in the book of Numbers, these prophecies. Anyway, we can go about this all day. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that none of this is relevant to Israel. None of it. Yes, asteroids will absolutely fall on most of the world. Israel will be unharmed. Because Israel has the ability to change what is going on over there. And this is what we're actually doing right here in this here class. We continue. All 7 were created and God established them in the firmament of the heavens, not in Sepharia. But this next part, that was not written in Sepharia. The next part is, all the constellations minister to the days of the sun. Now the days of the solar month are 30 days. And even within the month itself, we can separate it to 12 parts, 10 hours and a half, based on 365 days of the sun and 365 days and a quarter of the sun, according to Shmuel in Masechet Eruvin. And each constellation ministers to the days of the solar month for 2 days and a half, and 2 constellations minister for 5 days. Scratch your head. Just don't worry about it, okay? Just read with me. The chief which began at the beginning of the solar month is the same chief which completes at the end of the solar month. The one which opens is the one which closes. Each mazal governs for 2.5 days, which make up 30 days. 2.5 times 12 times the mazal is 30. Now, when there are an addition 10.5 hours left over, this is why we get sometimes 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. We have to complete these times, just like we did this last ER. The 2 days begin at the last day of the previous month, so we'll celebrate the Rosh Chodesh on Lamed, which is the 30th day of the last month, and Aleph. Normally it would just be Aleph, right? Aleph is the first day of the month, but when it's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, it's the last day of the last month and the first day of the first month. The great cycle of the sun is 28 years, counting 365 days and a quarter year. And therein are 7 small cycles, each of 4 years. 7 times 4, that's 28. The seasons of the solar year are 4, each season consisting of 91 days and 7.5 hours, exactly to the T. The beginning of the cycle of the seasons are the 4th, 2nd, 7th, 5th, 3rd, 1st, and 6th days. Okay, you got that? Between each cycle, there are 5 days and 6 hours. Again, I say, it's okay if you don't understand what I'm saying right now. This will not necessarily help with your walk with God, but just what I'm saying right now for us to learn that our sages knew these times and dates down to the T way back when. Okay, so we can be impressed by how in the world did they know this? Where do you think they got it from? Moses. Okay, so this great cycle, that's the great cycle. Now we're going to go into the smaller cycle. The tkufa, i.e. seasons, the times, the periods of the small cycle are 4 each year. Some of them last 91 days and 7.5 hours, and some last 92 days. The first year of the cycle of the 4 years has its time during Nisan at 6 p.m. In the second year, it's at 12 p.m. In the third year, it's at 6 a.m. And the fourth year, it's at 12 a.m. So you see how it goes. 6, 6, 6, 6. 6, 6, 6. Yes, 4 6s, not 3. Don't want to scare anybody. The Radal says here that according to the copy that he has of Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, it could be off. Again, I told you that many Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, many different compilations placed into one, which dates back 2,000 years, and they were compiled 1,300 years ago. So he's saying that something is a little bit off here. I'll explain. I also actually found it by my copy over here, the latest version, and the older copy that I have over here. I had to look in the older one. Usually the older one takes precedence, okay? Because it's, anyway, you understand. You get the logic of that, right? So he's saying that his copy of Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer could be off, as he compares it with what the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, speaks of, and he says that it is slightly out of order. Not wrong, just out of order. The 4 beginnings of the Tkufa, of the time, of the 4 months of Nisan, commence at the beginning of the night, at midnight, at the beginning of the day, and at noon. Night, midnight, beginning of the day, and at noon, respectively. As we know, we have 4 seasons, and they are Nisan, which is spring, Tammuz. I mean, these are the months that begin. Nisan, spring, begins in Nisan. Nisan is for spring, Tammuz is for summer, Tishrei is for fall, and Tevet is for winter. Now we're going to go into slightly more detail in regard to the times of the seasons. Now, all this has to do with the revolutions of the sun. 1. The first tkufa, the first time or period of Nisan, took place at the beginning of the hours of Saturn. 2. The tkufa of Tammuz took place in the middle of the hours of Saturn. 3. The tkufa of Tishrei occurred at the beginning of the hours of Jupiter. 4. The tkufa of Tevet took place at the middle of the hours of Jupiter. at the middle of the hours of Jupiter. And thus, with all other tkufot, with all the other periods, which occur at the beginning of the hours or at the middle of the hours. Now we're going to go into the seasons in correspondence with that. We're going to go into 7 cycles according to the stars or the planets here, if it'll help you. The first cycle took place at the beginning of the hour of Saturn, and the names of the planets of the hours are Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. The second cycle occurred in the hour of the planet which is in front of it, i.e. at the beginning of the hour of Jupiter. The third cycle occurred at the beginning of the hour of Mars. The fourth cycle entered at the beginning of the hours of the Sun. The fifth at the beginning hours of Venus. The sixth at the beginning hours of Mercury. And the seventh cycle entered at the beginning of the hour of the Moon. So we have our order over there. At the end of the 7 hours, at the end of the 7 cycles, at the end of 65 days of the great cycle of 28 years, the tkufa, the cycle returns, i.e. begins again at the beginning of the 4th day in the hour of Saturn in the hour when it was created. Perfect loop. Now, because of how old these texts are, this is where I saw my discrepancy over here. Because of how old these texts are, as well as the commentaries, I found a discrepancy in the printed version of my book. Like I said, the text itself in the book says 35 days, while the commentaries say 65 days. The Sepharia in Hebrew says 65 days, but the English says 35 days. So what I do, like I said, I went to the oldest print I have, which is this book over here, which concurred that it was in fact 65 days. Now, please, I know this stuff is a lot, which is why I'm not going into great detail to break everything down for you, giving you small explanations and comments along the way. So let's get through the next section, and after which we can have an interactive study and maybe a little bit more of understanding. But again, you got to bear with me. This is all part of the same thing. This will enrich you spiritually because we are learning Torah, even if you don't have a solid foundation of the times and movements of the sun and the planets. In 366 degrees, the sun rises and declines. How would they know this? It rises 183 degrees in the east, and it declines 183 degrees in the west, corresponding to 365 days of the solar year. The sun goes forth through 366 apertures and enters by the east. 90 days, it is in the southeast quarter, 91 days in the northeast quarter, and one aperture opening in the middle, and its name is Noga. This would be Venus, but that's what this is. That's the opening. That's called Noga. Now, just pay attention what kind of detail our sages had, and this came later, as this text is only 2,000 years old. They had to get it from somewhere before that as well. This knowledge was already given to Adam in various different books, which are available to the public in Hebrew. But again, good luck with that. At the Tekufa of Tishrei, at the time of Tishrei, the sun begins from the aperture of Noga, Venus, and goes through its revolutions towards the south quarter, through one aperture, translated from Hebrew chalon, window, after another until it reaches the aperture of Saturn. The aperture or window of Noga specifically is the light that is reserved for the righteous. So it's not necessarily a planet. There's a planet Noga, but this aperture, this window, that's where this good light that is reserved for the tzaddikim. That's the light of creation. At the time of Tevet, the sun begins from the aperture of Saturn and continues its course, returning backwards through one aperture after another until it reaches the aperture of Ta'aluma, through which the light goes forth, as it is said, and the thing that is hid bringeth he forth to light. Job 28:11. It would really help if I had some sort of like 3D model while showing you these things, but I don't. The Hebrew word for ta'aluma means either propaganda or publicly causing a ruckus. Ma ta'aluma, what's the ruckus? What's going on? What's all the balagan? At the Tekufa of Nisan, the sun begins from the aperture of ta'aluma, and it goes to the north quarter through one aperture after another until it reaches the aperture of Naaman. Naaman comes from the root word noam, which means pleasantness or loveliness. Noam zivcha, the pleasantness of your light. We sing this in Yedid Nefesh. At the Tekufa of Tammuz, at the time of Tammuz, the sun begins from the aperture of Naaman and goes on its course, returning backwards through the aperture after aperture until it reaches the aperture called Cheder. Cheder means room, whence the whirlwind goes forth. As it is said, out of the chamber cometh the storm, and cold out of the scattering winds. This is Job 37:9. The Radal explains that this is most likely due to the time of the year, as the end of the summer comes fall, and that's when we begin to feel the winds ramping up. In other words, once it goes there, certain winds start coming with it. So he's saying, based on this, we understand what time of year it is. Through these apertures, which are in the east, the sun goes forth, and opposite to them in the west, the sun sets. The Shekhinah is always in the west. As we have learned in the previous series, exactly why the Kotel, the western wall, had never been destroyed despite all Jerusalem being burned to the ground. Hine ze omed achar katlenu. Katlenu ze kotel ma'aravi shel Beit HaMikdash. I realize that I'm reading in Hebrew and you don't know this, so I will tell you what I am reading. Beit HaMikdash she'eino charev le'olam lama she'ashchina b'ma'arav. This verse was taken from, so this is from Bamidbar Rabbah 11, referring to the Song of Songs 2:9, written by King Solomon. My beloved resembles a gazelle or fawn of the Hinds. Hinds? I forgot. Hinds. Behold, he is standing behind our wall. Omed achar katlenu. Hakotel, katlenu, our kotel, right? Looking from the windows, peering from the lattices. Here are your apertures. Behold, he is standing behind our wall. That would be the western wall, where the Shekhinah will never leave, which is why the kotel has never been destroyed, right? Omed achar katlenu, kotel, our kotel. This is also just one of many verses and hard evidence, hard proof standing till this very day for every eye to see that directly disputes the false prophecies that our temple, would be burnt to the ground, not a stone left unturned, and yet. Ze kotel ma'aravi shel Beit HaMikdash she'eino charev le'olam. This is the western wall that will never be destroyed. This was written 2,000 years ago. Lama, why? Shehashchina b'ma'arav. The Shekhinah is in the west. Mashgiach min hachalonot, looking from the windows, in the merit of the patriarchs. Metzitz min hachalakim, peering from the lattices, in the merit of the matriarchs. We go on. The sun sets and worships before the Holy One, blessed be He, saying, Lord of all the worlds, Adon kol olamim. Adon kol olamim. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Because according to the order of creation, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And so every time its task is complete, it comes before its creator and gives a report. I hope you're starting to ask yourself some questions right now. We'll address it. Don't worry. I know exactly what you're thinking. Yes, you. There is one aperture which is in the middle of the firmament, and its name is Mizarim. And the sun does not go forth or set therein except once in its great cycle. It goes through it as on the day when it was created. One time, in its great cycle, it goes through exactly the same point of where it first was created. One time. Now, what is the word mizarim? This comes from the word memazrim. Mezarim, memazrim. Not to be confused with mamzerim. Bastards. We learned that one too, didn't we? Memazer, without memazer and mamzer, they're the same word without the punctuation, okay? So memazer means to cover. Now, this makes sense since it is placed right in the middle of the firmament that covers all. The Radal brings forth the verse from Job 38:32. Look how it's translated from Hebrew to English. Hatotzi mizarot, memazer, right? Mizarot be'ito, va'aish al banea tanchem. Can you take out the constellations? Mazarot is called, they're translating constellations, each in its time, and can you console Aish for her children? In other words, there is a constellation within another group of stars called Aish, which is a larger and more prominent star with smaller ones around her. In other Mefarshim, they're saying that this one is in the shape of a bear. So these smaller stars are bear cubs, if you will. But Rashi says that the word mazarot in this verse is actually the mazalot. Mazal, mazarot, mazalot. Very well could be. Now, We're already beginning to see a slightly clearer picture here, I hope. Now God is speaking to Job and asking him, Can you do all these things? Oh, I'm sorry. Is your life tough? Did you think that other things would happen? Did it not go according to your understanding? Okay, you don't understand that? You do understand, which is why you're complaining, right? It must be that you feel like injustice has been done, because clearly you know my plans. So if you know my plans, tell me, how'd I do all that stuff? Because, I mean, that's why you're getting upset and angry. Tell me, how'd I do this stuff? Surely you know, right? A lesson for all of us. Who knows such things? So, what we discussed until now was sunrise, and now we move to sunsets. Everything's where the sun goes, rises, and now, we're just talking about the sun sets in the west, sun comes before God says, I did everything you commanded me to do. Now, Pirkei Eliezer says, at night the sun is in the west. At night, the sun is in the west. Are you still thinking that? Good. Hold on to that. True statement. No matter where we are in the world, since the sun always sets in the west, at night, it's always in the west. We know where the sun goes. Where's the sun? It's there right now. Now it should be, there it is, and there it goes right now. At night, as far as we are concerned, the sun is always in the west. And particularly, then he goes on, at the Tkufa, at the time of Tishrei, and at the time of Tevet. It goes from the north to south. The sun goes on its course in the south quarter, and in the waters of the ocean, which are between the ends of the heavens and the ends of the earth, where it is submerged. What? The sun is submerged into what? There's an ends of the heaven and an ends of the earth, and the sun is submerged into what exactly right now? Good. More questions. Excellent. The Maharzu again references that which we did discuss last week. K'tse ha'aretz, the edge of the earth. Looking out onto the ocean as the sun sets, or out onto the wilderness, wherever. We can't really see it because we all live in populated areas, but y'all that live out in the countryside, or in South Africa, and you have the great African plains, where does the sun set for you? Although it is a little, yes, okay, right. You can actually see the horizon over there. Or if you're in Alaska, good for you. Okay, so looking out into the ocean as the sun sets, as far as our eyes, you, the observer, as far as our eyes are concerned, we can see the sun becoming smaller and smaller and smaller until it is no more than a thin layer of light between the sky and the water. Between the water, it looks like it's submerged and it looks like it's shrinking into itself, right? Because it's a mirror. Into the earth, it just looks like a thin line going into nothing. Yeah, same thing. Okay, you get it, but only you got the reflection on the water. On a clear day, there will be a perfect reflection, so it would seem that the sun is shrinking into itself, meaning being submerged into the water. Now we know that more is going on behind the scenes, obviously, but this is more than I can share right now. Most of the commentary to these teachings is referenced in those books, like I told you, that you should most likely not read, that I only read them in very particular times after very particular things, and that's it. So this is what's happening behind the scenes, and which angels are governing it and their names and what they do and all this stuff. You don't need to know this right now. Okay, we're learning this. He goes on, for the night is long and the way is long until the sun reaches the aperture which is in the east, meaning all night, right? Even the aperture through which it desires to go forth up until, So that's where Sepharia ends. Now, here's what's missing. I'm going to conclude this for you. At night in the west, during the times of Nisan to Tammuz, springtime, the sun circles to the northern point of the ocean between the edges of the heavens and the edges of the earth. Edges of the earth over here particularly means in the ocean. So this is like what you said, where it looks like it's shrinking and becoming submerged in the water, but it is not. But from our viewpoint down here, this is what we see. That's why we can see an edge, even though we know it's not an edge, right? Evan Ezra said, something that is round, a sphere, earth, and so on, does not have an edge. But As far as we can see, it does. Have to make this distinction. For the night is short and the way is short until it arrives to the aperture in the east, with which he desires to go forth. Now we're caught up. Now we're continuing from what is written in Sepharia. As it is said, it goes towards the south and turneth about unto the north. Ecclesiastes 1:6. Now, I want to take an opportunity right now to build on this. Here we are, learning about the constellations, the pathways of the sun, the seasons, the stars. Why? How did our sages know all about these details that science has only somewhat become aware of in the last 50 or 60 years? As we discussed in the old world, these things were known. It wasn't only for Israel. People knew these things. This is how it worked. The nations knew it, and Israel knew it. The difference is that Israel knows that all these actually have a purpose. The nations will see it. They'll be like, listen, like, for instance, Haman, right? You saw in the stars, he was a stargazer. He had all his other wizards and witches. His wife was the biggest one. And so anyway, so he says, listen, according to this time, now's the time to take out the Jews, right? And it was indeed, the decree was sent out. But Ein Mazal Yisrael, we'll take your decree and we'll raise you 50 or whatever. I don't know. But the point is, we got above that and we crushed that one. See how that works? So Israel knows that all these things have a purpose. And even though as far as the nations are concerned, the stars are set, which is why they knew when to go out to war, what deals to make, what this, what that, what the other, Israel can change that if indeed they understand that they are not governed by this. We all are governed by what we believe in. This is why fear is a terrible, terrible thing. Fear will separate us from God. Because if you're afraid of what's over here, you're missing that God is actually controlling what's over here for you to actually not be afraid of it. So, should we go out and start investigating the stars? What good would that do us? How would that bring us closer to our Creator? What we are doing here, in this case, is simply giving credit and respect where it is due. Solomon said it, after all, in Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. So why do we learn these things? Because when someone asks you, so who made the sun and gave it its path, function, and purpose? You should have an answer. Right now, we don't know, but I mean, the sages knew thousands of years ago with no telescopes or nothing they knew. How did they know these things? You have answers now. This is like documented. And this answer can be proven because it dates back thousands of years, like we said. So when I say we learn these things to know our Creator, I mean it. This should bolster your confidence with who governs all these things. Let's take a look at the verse we just brought here from the text in Ecclesiastes. But now let's read we'll go Ecclesiastes chapter 1:1-8, okay? The words of Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem. This is Solomon. Hevel havalim, amar Kohelet. Hevel havalim akol havel. Vanity of vanities, said Kohelet. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has man in all his toil that he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth endures forever. The sun rises and sets, and to its place it yearns and rises there. See? It yearns to go to its place. Solomon knew this as well, that it yearns to go to its place. It goes to the south and goes around the north. Then it goes around and around, and it will return to its circuits. Exactly what we're learning about here, what we just read. So Solomon already knew this 1,000 years before. Where did he get it from? All the rivers flow to the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place where the rivers flow, there they repeatedly go. All things are wearisome. No one can utter it. The eye shall not be sated from seeing, nor shall the ear be filled from hearing. In other words, you're seeing these things, you're hearing these things. You can never hear enough because there's always more, meaning there is no end to these things. So And how can there be, there's no beginning either if there's no end, right? So remember, whatever has been created, whatever has a beginning has an end. Something is created, that means it has an end, but that which has never been created has no end. No beginning, no end. Through understanding and recognizing creation is how we develop reverence towards God. So when we read the fear of the Lord is beginning of knowledge, we should, knowledge, and then there's knowledge, wisdom, there's 2 verses for this. We should not read fear as it is translated, but rather the reverence of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Knowledge, to know, look around, understand that this thing is perfect, this thing is precise, and we are part of it. The more you see, the more you see. You then start to get a little bit more perspective as to how truly small you are in the world, and especially within creation itself. You ever watch these things on YouTube sometimes where it's like the planets in perspective one to another? We think that, Earth is pretty big. You put it next to the Venus or Mercury or whatever, and then next to the sun, and it's like a microdot, right? And then our sun compared to star number this and that or whatever, and you can't even see the Earth. You can't even see the sun anymore. What are we in there? Where you can't, nothing, right? For perspective over here. So the more you know of God, you realize that all this, see, the more you learn, especially the more aware you become, the smaller you become. That's when you begin to realize creation. Because right now, you think you are the center of everything for all the wrong reasons. It happens to be true, but for all the wrong reasons. But once you realize that God actually created all this for you, that is where your knowledge begins, because that is a humbling experience. And once we humble ourselves, then we are ready to receive. If we are not humble, that means I have what to give. I have what to offer. I, me. I know best. Me. I'm full of myself, right? And so if I'm full of myself, God wants to pour all this stuff on. No, I don't need it, because I got everything. I know everything. But someone who has nothing, someone who finally truly sees that they are this small, a lot of times that tzaddikim, they don't need to be humbled in order to realize the magnitude of God. But King David, he was synonymous for doing this. All the Tehillim, his praising God of the sun and the moon and the stars and the animals and the trees and everything. In his dreams, when he was sleeping, when he was awake, everything was of God. He realized God everywhere, which is why he was so humble, because he recognized where his place was and that it was all created for his sake. As for us, which is why he said, I will do everything and everything for your sake. I will wake up before the sun and praise you before the sun even comes. I'm going to outpraise the sun for God's sake. So this is a very humbling experience. This is how we gain that knowledge and understanding. This is the difference between learning anything for our own sake and for the sake of knowing He who spoke and the world came to be. Mishamal ve'olam HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can do almost exactly the same things that you have been doing up until now. You can read the same things, but these little get-togethers we have every week, it's all for the sake of internal change. That's how the change is made. If you change, you from here, so does your reality around you, because it is a matter of receiving new eyes, a new perspective, a new understanding. It's like doing something that you have always been afraid of, terrified of doing it, and then you see people doing it and they're not afraid. Why are they not afraid? They were all afraid. Then they went into it and they say, oh, it's not scary. Same thing, right? Every single day. You know, Judaism, Israel can be very, very overwhelming. Sometimes I get overwhelmed and I live here. I know what's up here. And still it's like, it's a lot. Nevertheless, the more you see, the more you see. The less there is of yourself, the more you can actually receive. The change always comes from within. We continue. It goes to the south of the Tkufa of Tishrei, the south of the period of Tishrei, at the end of the period of Tevet, and turns to the north at the period of Nisan and the period of Tammuz. All this was previously explained, and it can be seen in the full verse of Ecclesiastes 1:6. It goes to the south and goes around to the north. The will goes around and around. The will? Sovev, tzafon, holech haruach. It goes around and around, and it will return to its circuits. Sovev, that's what it says in Hebrew. Sovev, lehistovev is to turn around. Round and round it goes. On its course for 6 months is the south quarter, and for 6 months the north quarter. And owing to its circuits, the sun returns to the aperture, which is in the east. Though it's not written in the English, the sovev, round and round part is actually essential, but what else is no? Why does it say round and round, meaning twice, sovev, not just sovev, round and round? Why twice? That no matter the trajectory, excuse me, one second, I'm going to do this. That no matter the trajectory or course, summer or winter, in all of these, it's cyclical. Summer, winter, round and round, 1 year, same cycle. Furthermore, when it says here in this last section, the sun, if you will, in the Hebrew, it says ruach, wind, but it's referring to the sun. It also depends what the time of year is. Now, if you've noticed, over and over again, our sages are going all the way back to Solomon, who received this from the days of Moses, which was understood already by Abraham, which was handed to Adam. It says that it is the sun that moves. They're saying the sun over here moved. Did you notice this? Is this bothering anybody else? The sun is setting, but is the sun moving as far as we are concerned, like as far as we know? The sun doesn't set. We move, and our planet moves around the sun. We revolve around the sun. The sun spins, all the planets, they all revolve around the sun. Everything spins. So what's the deal over here? What's going on over here? As the reader, what is our understanding? Is that who's at the center of all things? You are. That's right. Me? Yes, you. You are the center of the world. You are the center of creation. This is what they're trying to hint at over here, very humbly, though. This is from the perspective of the reader, of the seer, of the beholder. And so this does not contradict the astronomical data either, because we're giving you a different perspective here. So the verse, which was omitted from Sepharia, concludes like this. On its axis does the wind return. It's not the wind is the sun in this case. On its axis does the wind return. To the aperture in the east does the wind return. The sun has, now, okay, get that? Cool. Now, the sun has 3 letters of God's name written upon his heart. It says either upon or within. Again, this info is taken from places that I cannot share, but what I can say is that the 3 letters are most likely, in one of the cases, their opinions. One of them is Chabad, Chet Bet Daled, which is Chochma, Binah, Vadat, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. This, of course, is most likely, generally speaking, referring to the top 3 Sfirot, right? The top 3. More specifically, they are 3 out of 4 letters of God's name in a particular order. I'm not telling you that. You don't need to know that. In other words, God's 4-letter name, 3 of those letters in this particular order. As is written in Psalms 19, 1 and 2. Well, 2, but for the conductor, a song of David, the heavens recite the glory of God, and the sky tells of the work of his hands. Hashamayim mesabrim kevod el u'maaseh yadav magid harakia. God's name is actually in all of his creation, and by learning, he puts his name for like the animation purposes. And by learning his creation for his name's sake, we get to know God. That's what we're doing here. Another place we can see is in Exodus 23:20. Behold, I am sending an angel before you to guard on the way and bring you to the place that I have prepared. This angel is a creation of God. And as we know, all of creation has a guardian angel over it, down to a single blade of grass or a grain of sand. Now look at this. Beware of him and obey him. Do not rebel against him, for he will not forgive your transgression. For my name is within him. There you go. God's name is within that of his creation. Do you think God's name is not within you? Hello. If you live and breathe, God's name is within you. What are you doing about that, right? But Israel, that's a whole nother story. Deuteronomy 32:9, when the Most High gave nations their lot, when he separated the sons of man, he set up the boundaries of peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. 70 nations, 70 nephesh that went down of Jacob, that went down to Egypt. Because the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, the lot of his inheritance. We don't have a guardian angel. We don't need one. God. We are, because the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob. Specifically, it says Jacob. We've had this whole, do you want to call yourself Israel? If you want to call yourself Israel, that is entirely on you. But if you do not go through Jacob, okay. God's own portion that he said, that he set aside for himself. That is why we are called a nation of Pharisees, Perushim, Lifrosh, to withdraw from the world, as we are commanded to do. God's name, his Torah, and Israel are all one in the same. Now, there is another opinion from Midrash, from the Hidden Book, that actually there are 13 letters on the heart. Not 3, 13, corresponding to 13 words in verse 5 of Genesis 1. So Genesis 1:5 reads, and God called the light day, meaning on the sun, right? The light day, and the darkness he called night, and it was evening, it was morning, day 1. Vaikra Elohim laor yom, velachoshech kara laila, vayhi erev, vayhi boker, vayhi erev, vayhi boker, I miscount. Vaikra Elohim laor yom, velachoshech kara laila, vayhi erev, vayhi boker yom echad. That's 13. So 13, when he called the light day. That's from that verse. That's why it's a hint towards that. So this is where the light became day, but you also have the title of the night within the verse, Laila, right? We also know that 13 corresponds with God's 13 attributes of mercy, our 13 principles of faith. 13 is the numerical value of the word echad, aleph, chet, dalid, 1, and so on. The angels lead him. Such as lead him by day do not lead him by night, and such as lead him by night do not lead him by day. This is the sun, escorting the sun. Why is there a separation of night and day again over here? Because God separated between the light and between the darkness, and God called the light day and the darkness he called night. Boundaries, remember? So, we have a changing of the guard over here. And now again, we can see the matter of perspective, because the sun is always shining, right, somewhere, and likewise it is always dark elsewhere. Meaning, does the earth revolve around the sun or the sun around the earth? We're beginning to see a pattern over here. I hope, again, I really hope you're with me. And that is that the understanding and the spiritual implication that we are getting is actually based on the observer of what we see. Meaning that the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, as well as all of creation actually revolves around you. So regarding the angels that escort the sun, according to the Radal, there are several sources for this. Yalkut Shimoni, Rabbi Alexandri, says that 4 angels are in front and 4 angels are behind. In other various sources, it says that there are 5 during the day and 3 at night. And again, 3 at night, no, as far as we're concerned. But wait, we're going to stamp the final nail in the coffin over here. This alludes to the word light, O, which is written 5 times during the first day. So 5 times O, light, so 5 during the day and 3 at night. Okay, these 5 times light could be the angels escorting the sun. And in Tosfot Chulin, in Masechet Chulin, it's written in the Midrash that there are 12 angels escorting the sun, corresponding to the 12 Mazalot, constellations. Now, regarding the opinion we discussed just before of the 13 letters upon the heart of the sun, is because in Genesis 1, there are 13 allusions to the light, sun, morning, day, and so on. All things light related are 13 in Genesis 1. So how do we reconcile with the angels who lead him by day, don't lead him by night? If they are always with the sun, then should it not always be day where they are? Given this understanding, there should never be a changing of the guard. And yet it says, those that lead him by day do not lead him by night, and vice versa. But this, of course, cannot be, since we clearly read that God created the dark and called it night. God made this separation. You see, so it's not even like, no, God is the one that made the separation. So there is day and there is night. Now I'm going to directly translate the Maharzu's words here so you see the beauty in all this. Although here he goes, and I quote, although the day and the night can never see a difference for themselves, meaning day does not experience night and night does not experience day, because this is how God said it would be. It is only subject to the individual's place. The observer, where you are. This is the understanding we discussed regarding the observer. End quote. This is the understanding, I'm telling you now, that we discussed in regarding to the observer, you and me experiencing these things based on where we are standing at the time. Now he continues. However, the place that we know as the place, Hamakom, is anyone? Jerusalem, the temple. That is the place, as in Jacob, Vayivga b'makom vayelen sham, and he hit the spot, boom. What is the spot? The spot is temple, the spot is Jerusalem temple. That's what everything revolves around, essentially, because this is where we all got to be. The sunrise, we continue Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, but fascinating, right? It kind of settles a whole lot of this. What? Right? Okay. The sun rides on the chariot, on the Merkava. Merkava's chariot. The Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim 3:10 says, its pillars he made of silver, its couch of gold, its curtain of purple. Now I read this in Hebrew. Listen, Merkava, that's our word of the day, or of the minute anyway. Amudav asa chesef, refidato zahav, Merkavo, Merkava, Argaman. Okay. Translations, what can you do? Merkava, his Merkava. Argaman, not purple, but crimson. Now, we have learned before that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob became the Merkava for God as they laid the foundation for correcting the sins of Adam. Later on, David joined their ranks, becoming the fourth leg. The Merkava, a Merkava, literally means a chariot. That's what it means. Like Paro's Kora Merkavot, Pharaoh and his chariots, right? So does God, the question is, does God need anything or anyone to use as a means of transportation? Do I have to ask? This is a metaphor. You get that. Okay, good. This is the concept that the sun is a Merkava, but it rather signifies honor, splendor, and royalty. Argaman. I don't want to confuse anyone with the colors, but again, according to the Zohar, the color of Tiferet, splendor, represented by Jacob, Israel, is Argaman, crimson. In other places, it's also yellow and gold. Nevertheless, they're all within the same thing. Now, there is purple in crimson as well, and there's also yellow, in addition to, obviously, red. So don't get caught up with all just one color per sephira, okay? Each one of these things says Chesed and Gvura have 3 each. Okay, and it depends which one. So the colors also change. Nevertheless, it's not the point right now. The point is that crimson is alluding to the sun, which alludes to Tiferet, splendor. Jacob, Israel, through the culmination of Abraham and Isaac, Jacob was chosen to be Israel. Merkavo Argaman. And his color was this, as said, sung by Solomon in Song of Songs. And everything in creation from beginning to end is all about Israel. And it's all for Israel. We'll see it in the end of this. The word Argaman is made up of two words, Arag, man, not Harag. Harag is to kill. Arag, le'erog, is woven, man, manna, woven manna. In other words, as we had discussed previously, the manna is the sustenance of all the spiritual and physical worlds and realms that come directly from beneath the throne of God. And this is from the form of light. The Radal brings the verse from 2 Kings 23:11. And he abolished the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun, from the entrance of the house of the Lord until the chamber of Nathan Melech, the eunuch who was in the outskirts, and he burnt the sun chariots with fire. I'll read this in Hebrew so you hear the language. Vayishbot et hasusim, those are the horses, asher natnu malchei Yehuda, lashemesh, the horses that the kings of Judah gave to the sun, mibo beit Hashem, from the coming of the house of the Lord, el lishkat Natan melech hasaris, asher ba'parvarim, in the outskirts. Parvar in modern day Hebrew is the suburbs. Ve'et markevot hashemesh saraf ba'esh, and the merkavot, the chariots of the sun, he burnt with fire. Chariots of fire, which reminds us of what? 2 Kings 2:11. I'm telling you right now, I accidentally opened up 2 Kings 2:11 instead of 2 Kings 23:11. And I got that. I'm like, thank you. That was an accident. This is not written anywhere, but now we have another point of reference. Baruch Hashem. 2 Kings 2:11. And it was that they were walking, and behold, a fiery chariot and fiery horses. And they separated them both, and Elijah ascended to heaven in a whirlwind. Vayhi hema olchim haloch v'daber v'hine rechev esh, rechev merkava, v'susei esh vayifradu ben shnehem v'ayal Eliyahu v'sara b'shamayim. He went up, he got taken up, chariots of fire. The sun rides on the chariot, right? So we're going back to what's written. The sun rides on the chariot, on the Merkava, and rises crowned as a bridegroom. As it is said, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber and rejoice as a mighty man to run his course. Psalms 19:6. Now, here's the strangest thing. The Hebrew in Sepharia will say verse 7, meaning 19:7, while the English translation will say 19:5, when in reality, in the book itself, it's verse 6. Like in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, and this is actually Psalms 19, verse 6. Who translated? I don't know. So like I said, since it's the only thing available, use it, but I'm here to help you correct that. Now, look what we get when we read the next verse in Psalms. Okay, so 19:7. From the end of the heavens is its source, and its circuit, meaning its way, right, its pathway, is to their ends, and none is hidden from its heat. Ve'ein nistar michamato. Michamato, this could also mean wrath, but it comes from the word chama, sun, heat. Michamato could be the wrath, meaning the heat of the sun, also the wrath of God. This next part, don't even bother reading in Sepharia. It's a complete mess. It's there, but it's not, and it's out of order. I'll read it for you. I translated it to English. The sun rays and face, which are turned downward to earth, are of fire, meaning the rays of the sun and the sun's face that are turned downward to earth are of fire. And its rays, the sun rays, and its face, which are turned upwards, are of hail. Okay? That's what Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says. This, like many examples brought here, is a metaphor to summertime fire and wintertime hail. However, this happens simultaneously. Obviously, summer and winter can be split by the upper and lower hemispheres. For instance, the winter months in South Africa are the summer months anywhere else in the world, right? Northern hemisphere, and vice versa. And the Radal clearly says that during the summer months, When, as we know, it's hot in the northern hemisphere, he says that's when the sun is in the north. And in the winter months, it's in the south. Very clear. Just reminding us that we, guess what, do live in a sphere. And the earth is not flat. Just a reminder. Perspective, reality. Perspective is also our reality. Don't forget that, according to Jerusalem. But they're both real. In winter, the sun turns the upper half of his face downwards. What's the upper half of his face? The hail downwards, meaning it's not as hot. You get it? And were it not for the fire which warms the face of the hail, the world could not endure because of the ice cold, as it is said, who can stand before his cold? Psalms 147:17. He hurls his ice like crumbs before his cold. Who can stand? The cold comes due to the lack of the direct sun. But I want to read the next 3 verses because this will bring home the verse that we said before specifically about Israel. So we're going to go Psalms 47, 18, 19, and 20. So we just read about the who could stand in verse 17, 18. He sends his word and melts them. He blows his wind, water runs. He tells his words to Jacob, his statutes and his judgments to Israel. He did not do so to any nation, and they did not know the judgments. Hallelujah. We say this every day. Davening. Mishpatim ba'al yadum. Hallelujah. The Maharzu just threw something in his commentary to finish it all off. Very interesting. He says that the earth has experienced all sides of the sun. As we know, it rotates, as do we. So we see everything, right? We can also very clearly see it in satellite images. In fact, whenever there's a large CME, coronal mass ejection, that's when it looks like the sun is, spewing lava. I'll give you a website. Go to Suspicious Observers, okay? Suspiciousobservers.com or on YouTube. Every day they follow the sun. Why do they follow the sun? For any kind of CMEs. When this happens, and it faces the earth, they can accurately predict power surges, power outages, and earthquakes within a very small radius, relatively speaking. Like the guy will say, yep, and this means something's coming in this vicinity, and it happens. Whatever happens in the world, it's being spewed from the sun. Now, if the sun or earth would not spin, meaning if the earth was flat and the sun was just this beam rotating around, that would mean that the earth would have been destroyed 1 billion times over, as every single CME, coronal mass ejection from the sun, would hit earth directly. There'd be nothing left. So he concludes with these words: but the far side of the moon, or the dark side as we call it, has never been seen. And when he says never, he means never, which should get us very curious as to what is going on up there. And regarding this, the ways of the moon, we will discuss this, God willing, in the next class. As for now, thus concludes chapter 6, as these are the ends of the ways of the sun. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope to see you next time. Bye now.